Welcome to Keeping Up with Our Community, a podcast for and about Romeo Community Schools. Each week, we will invite different guests to share insights about some unique aspects of our schools. This podcast is powered by the MIT TV of Romeo, Michigan. If you're looking to start a podcast for your business or personal use, look no further than MIT TV. Their in-studio podcast experience allows you to record perfect audio and capture amazing video. That's all right here at the MIT TV of Romeo, Michigan. Contact them now via email for a free consultation and schedule a visit at mit.tvpodcast@gmail.com. That's mitt.tvpodcast@gmail.com. Hello, my name is Marianne Brush, and I'm the Communications and Marketing Supervisor for Romeo Community Schools. It is my pleasure to introduce episode 31 of the Keeping Up with Our Community Schools podcast. In today's episode, we will give our listeners the opportunity to get to know three new administrators who are joining us this school year. Jason Eldridge, Romeo Middle School Assistant Principal, Charlene McVetti, Croswell Early Childhood Supervisor, and Amy Wojciechowski, Amanda Moore Elementary Principal. I will now turn it over to Superintendent Dr. Todd Robinson to lead the discussion.
Welcome to the Keeping Up with Our Community podcast, and welcome again to Romeo. So we're super excited to just have each of you here and the roles that you've recently stepped into, and things are going 90 miles an hour right now. A little different for each of you, but I think all the same we can just say that it's a really busy time. So I think that in some cases makes this a perfect time for us to just pause for a little bit and hear a little bit from you about who you are. We'll reach a group of people maybe with this podcast that will meet you that might not ever have, because they don't have kids, in the facilities that you're going to be spending most of the time in. But we'll also direct others, to listen to this, because it'll give them a chance to hear from you, maybe people that work directly for you, before they actually get, legitimate FaceTime and just the busyness. So kids are coming, whether we're ready or not. So anyways, let's start, and let's maybe take the opportunity to tell our listeners a little bit about, your professional background. You each certainly come with experience that's prepared you for this, or you wouldn't went through this, the whole hiring process to be here. And in some cases, each of you has some unique things that really set you apart to have you be the one. So I'll start with Amy, because Amy's background kind of comes literally across the country.
Yeah.
Well, to Arizona and then back from Arizona.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Talk about your professional experience.
Yeah, so I grew up in Michigan, born and raised in Michigan. Went to East Detroit Public Schools, grew up in East Point, Wayne State University for my bachelor's in elementary education. And I was walking to class one day. It was negative 10 degrees. And my tears were freezing to my face, and I just said, I can't live through another Michigan winter. Mm-hmm. So I decided that I was going to move to Arizona, where there is no more Michigan winter. And I started teaching in a Title I school in Deer Valley Unified School District. I taught 4th grade and 6th grade for 5 years. And then decided that while I was in the classroom, I wanted to be a principal. And got my master's degree at Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, Arizona, and then became an instructional coach at Saguaro Elementary School in the Washington Elementary School District. I did that for a couple of years, and then became an assistant principal at Manzanita Elementary School in the Washington Elementary School District, and then most recently I was the principal at Sunset Elementary School in that same district.
All right. Washington Elementary School District. So I learned a little bit in your journey that in Arizona, you actually have school districts that are just elementary schools. Yeah. And I think in your case, a couple of middle schools, mm-hmm. and then separate districts that were only high school. So a little different than Michigan. I also learned that the elementary schools that you both taught at and you led at are significantly bigger than traditional elementary size in Michigan. So Charlene, how about your professional background?
Sure. Well, I started young in early childhood and in education. Actually, in high school, began working in the field and kind of found a love for it at a young age. Went to college, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life at 18. And of course, everyone else here, I'm sure they did, right? But took a few courses, and after working in the field and taking a few courses, I said, this is it. This is what I want to do. And took that route. I actually ran an early childhood center in my early 20s. I started young and got my feet wet in that. Continued on with my education, got my master's in early childhood education. And for over 10 years, I was at Lake Orion Community Schools, not far from here. And my journey has brought me here to Romeo, the next step.
Yes. So definitely, you guys are lifelong learners. You know what I'm saying? You've not only had unique experiences, to be an elementary principal and an early childhood supervisor, but also have continued, your education along the way. So, Jason, we bring you into the middle school madness. I'm a former
Excited
middle
to be
school principal, so there's a special place in my heart for 12 through 14-year-olds. Talk a little bit about your professional background.
So, been in education about 17 years, coming from Oxford, where I've spent my entire career, as well as childhood. So I've always been what I keep referring to now as Romeo adjacent. So obviously familiar with the community and everything here. So, professionally, 17 years, I started off teaching math and physics in Oxford High School. Did that for several years and just kind of continued finding my way into, I guess you could say, increasingly leadership roles. I think in my 4th year teaching, I was asked to run our International Baccalaureate Diploma program. So I ran that program for about 8 years from its birth, and then was able to hand it off as I took on what was referred to as a science instructional position, which was a district-wide position. In that role, I supported teaching and learning K-12, and a lot of times my work spanned well beyond science teachers, just supporting district initiatives and anything that needed to be done. Those duties, other duties as assigned, was very, very nicely used.
Yeah. So I'm recalling, Jason, part of our conversation in kind of the final phase of the hiring process, where you talked about, your acumen for math and science, and you headed off to Ann Arbor to be a student at U of M, and kind of realized maybe you were a little bit of a fish out of water. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I thought I did know what I wanted to be going to college. I was going to be an aerospace engineer, and I was going to work for NASA. And I told people at one point that I was going to be the first person on Mars. I held on to that for a little long.
Yeah.
Again, fish out of water, kind of in studying those programs and realizing that wasn't really for me.
Yeah.
I didn't have the advantage in high school of, the pre-engineering programs that we all have access to now.
Yeah.
So again, just kind of finding my way, and I actually had a pretty impactful professor that really just put things out there and basically made me see that, okay, if money didn't matter, what would you do?
Yeah.
And just teaching and learning was always a passion of mine. I was a high school wrestler as well, and one of the favorite things I used to do was to kind of volunteer back coaching kids.
Sure.
So just that experience and just helping people get better was always something back in my mind and heart. And it's just found my way.
So we're hanging out with middle level adolescents instead of aeronautical engineers. Like,
Probably pretty similar.
Yeah.
Say, might be about the same.
Yeah, right.
So it hasn't been that long for each of you, some sooner, closer than others, but we take hiring very seriously in our district, and our hiring process can be, I guess I would say maybe a little intense at times. Sometimes that's just, how close phases of it together. I know, Jason, for you, it was coming down to the end of the summer, the hiring season, and, we really condensed steps of the process. We try and keep fidelity in the process, certainly for leadership positions. So it's a little bit intense. So maybe just a takeaway from the experience and what that kind of was telling you as you were pursuing the position, and maybe what's been validated just in the little time you've been here. So Charlene, why don't you tell us first about
Sure.
hiring in
Yeah.
Romeo?
To be honest, I actually appreciated the rigorous interview process. It made me feel as though Romeo schools really cared and invested in the leadership that they were putting in place. So it was a green flag for me
Yeah.
as to these people care about who's leading their school district. So although it was intense,
Mm-hmm.
I was grateful for it.
Yeah.
And it made me appreciate Romeo schools even more in the process.
Yeah.
I did sweat a lot.
Yeah.
And I left some of the interviews saying, I'm not sure what I said.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's part of it.
but it felt good,
Good.
knowing that you cared so much. And I also took away a true understanding of the passion and love this school district has for the Romeo community and its families. And that was a huge green flag as well,
Sure.
because that's what I was a part of, and that's what I wanted to continue to be
Yeah.
part of. So,
That's an interesting twist because, you all were in positions in healthy, vibrant districts where, you had invested a legitimate amount of time. So it wasn't like you were sitting there without a job. You know what I'm saying? You could be a little choosy, I guess you would say. So what would you add, Jason, from, I will apologize to you again that I think literally almost within a week, a Monday through Friday week, we kind of put you in the group of candidates for the middle school principal job through the ringer. So what would you take away from that?
Well, it was certainly intense, cramming what would have been 2-week process into basically 4 days.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was intense, but again, and I shared with you earlier, kind of in our final conversation before hiring, I really appreciated the kind of lead into the process, the small group beginning of the process. It made me feel a little more comfortable, a little bit more able to be myself, so that I felt like I was able to put my true self forward, without the big committee. And then, as it progressed, I really came to appreciate those focus groups, which is, again, it kind of escalated as we went. And I appreciated just the range of stakeholders brought into that conversation. I really appreciated my time with those students, just getting to know them a little bit, getting to know some of their wishes for an assistant principal, what they're hoping for in the school. I found that to be one of the more powerful pieces of the whole puzzle, was just that time with them. And same with teachers, just hearing what the teachers, what is it? I could gather a lot from the questions they were asking. I could gather a lot from, basically I asked them, what would you want me to know?
Yeah.
And, I wrote down everything, and I plan to take those to heart. So I kind of used that as an opportunity myself to feel Romeo out. And here I am.
It's funny, I hadn't thought about our student focus group, but I'm even going back to, in my time as a middle school principal, I think we probably had the opportunity to hire 3 or 4 assistant principals. And, when we went to this we got to engage some people in this process, because our early childhood families, they know there's a new position in Charlene's case, and, who are you going to get for this? And our middle school families, the same when it comes and our staff, and so it's a little bit harder at the elementary level, so we didn't necessarily put 3 and 4-year-olds in front of Charlene.
I'm kind of jealous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I would have.
You'll get the on the job evaluation. Just wait a couple
Get
weeks.
all the questions.
I found over time when you can put some people that, adults have kind of said, hey, these are some of the lead people in a process, in a room with middle school kids, it might not surface who the best candidate is, but they will definitely mine out someone who might not be. And so I'm appreciative of the middle school, and I'm glad you enjoyed that. So, Amy, we were trying to choreograph your process around, let's not make this poor woman fly back from Arizona any more than we have to. And you were also right at the tail end of your school year in Arizona, because you guys, I think, finished school at sometime in May. So
Right before, yeah.
Yeah, talk about what you took away from the process.
Yeah, I mean, like you had mentioned, I started the interview process virtually, and I think interviewing for such a high leverage position virtually is difficult. There's so much value in sitting around a table with somebody and getting to know them and, seeing just how they are in person. So, I had my first interview with just some of my now coworkers, my colleagues, and Rob Murray and I could feel that vibe through the screen. I mean, we're 2,000 miles away, and we're watching each other through a computer screen. And I was like, I just got a good feel. So yeah, we really quickly very much arranged, hey, when can you get out to Michigan? And, how can we make this happen? And, like Jason, I really appreciated the stakeholder groups. They're the heart of what we do. Our classified, our hourly staff, our certified teachers, our parents, they're the heart of it. So the ones that we're working with day in and day out to really make sure that we're meeting their needs. So I loved just having that group of people in front of me and getting to see why I do this, who I'm doing this for, and sitting in that room with them and just looking at their faces and hearing their questions, hearing what they want from me and how I can best serve them. I really valued that in that process.
I think the other thing that we're intentional about, in addition to engaging, at least a legitimate group, representative group throughout the process, is also allowing you the opportunity to actually do some of this in the facility that your future job will be in. And so, that was something that we planned for, like to have your focus groups at Amanda Moore, so that not only could you meet people and continue in the process, but you also were kind of getting the lay of the land for the building, likewise, for the two of you. So you're educators at heart, and sometimes I think, some of our most gifted teachers get this pressure at times that they have to want to advance, to something more in terms of a leadership role or something like that. And it doesn't matter whether you're working with the youngest of our learners or even for our high school. But there are certain people, I, of course, at one point in time in my career was one of those where you're doing good work with kids in the classroom and all of a sudden, like, something happens, and it isn't always just maybe this one point in time, but when did it click, you know what I'm saying, or what might have been a few of those defining moments that said, hey, I think I'm gonna pursue something more in terms of educational leadership and taking on a leadership role. So Amy, why don't you kind of tell us, what that looked like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always naturally led towards being a leader. My dad was a leader in his industry, in the auto manufacturing industry, and I've always watched him and just kind of watched how he carried himself, his interactions with his, workers and his employees that he spoke about. And I kind of naturally always had leadership in my heart. So I found myself, as I reflected on this question, in high school, I was a captain of my basketball team. Took on leadership roles in my sorority in college, and it just kind of found me throughout my life. So when I became a teacher, as a first year teacher, I went to my principal and I said, hey, what leadership opportunities do you have on campus? I want to do something. And she said, you could be our student council advisor. Sweet. I loved that. So I took on student council, and then I just still had that itch. I was like, I want to do something else. I want to do something else. So I was our PBIS team lead. And then I still just wanted more. So I decided that I was going to go get my degree, to be an educational leader. And at the time, I started a new teacher mentor program. So I just took on all of these leadership roles and started to think, if not me, then who? If I'm not going to be the one to start making changes or, pushing for something better in our educational system, then who's going to? So that's just really what drives me and what pushed me to that point of being a leader, is just always seeing where can I have that opportunity for growth, whether it was my basketball team, my PBIS team, it's always looking for how can I help others grow, and how can I help be that change.
Yeah, it was interesting, not necessarily all on my accord, but in the reference checking process, to talk to some of the leaders above you in your district in Washington, kind of spoke to, like, while you were doing good work along the way as a teacher and instructional leader, they saw that aspiration in you. Because I remember at one point asking, I believe it was the superintendent, this seems kind of fast tracked. Like, tell me how this works out here. It's like, we don't track anyone any faster than their potential. So kudos to you. Charlene,
Thank
what
you.
about you?
I feel much like Amy. I think a lot of times leadership is kind of a natural thing that you grow up in
Hmm.
if you have that quality. Um, I actually grew up a pastor's daughter, so I didn't have a choice in the matter. I had to lead, whether I wanted to or not. I
Yeah,
had to be an example.
yeah,
And as you grow up, you learn to appreciate that more, I think,
yeah,
and understand that. And growing up that way, it helping others and leading others was just natural and just was what I was supposed to do.
yeah,
And going into the field of education, again, like Amy said, it just naturally progressed because I kind of was the person that, well, what else can I do?
Yeah.
What else can I do? And most of that comes from a heart, I think, of wanting to help people, right? Like what more can I do to help people? What more can I do to help? And so it happened naturally in a lot of ways.
yeah. Awesome. Jason, how about you?
Well, I would say that I probably couldn't be any more opposite to that. Um, so, as I kind of mentioned earlier, I think I was 4 years in when I was kind of put into a leadership role. And truth be told, I didn't want that leadership role right off the bat. And I remember a conversation with our principal. No, I really, I don't feel like I'm done with my time in the classroom yet. I feel like I have more to offer. I was teaching some AP classes at the time, and, you know, uh, lo and behold, I show up and I have an incomplete schedule, and it's, hey, we really want you to do this, and we think you're the person to lead us through this. And we were kind of in the infancy of just even understanding what International Baccalaureate was.
Yeah.
So, of course, I did it, and fell in love with it. I'd say I fell in love quickly. Just the systematic way of figuring things out, the helping understand high expectations for students and how to make sure that those students are meeting those high expectations. That was just a really fun process for me. Through those several years, just myself growing as a leader. Again, I did find myself a lot of times saying, if it's not me to say this stuff, then who will? So it just kind of snowballed through my career. And then again, I would also say that I have a lot of thanks to a lot of the principals and assistant principals around me helping to lift me up as a leader, seeing that potential in me. Even though I was late into the game of deciding I wanted to be an educator, so maybe it took me a little longer to see that.
Sure.
But again, they lifted me up. They continued to offer opportunities for me, and every time I did it, I just fell in love more and more with just the idea of leading education. And I think that the final say in all that was I had done an aspiring principals program through Oakland Schools, and I think that sealed the deal for me.
Sure.
And I guess you could say that that's the moment that it finally clicked was like, hey, I think I could actually do this and
Yeah,
enjoy it.
that's great.
We'll
Thank
find
you.
out though. Just
Maybe that's something for all of us to reflect on, is there have been people along the way that maybe saw a little bit more in us than we saw in ourselves, or just presented an opportunity, or considered considered us maybe for an opportunity at a an age younger than might be normal. So a shout out to all of those who influenced each of our careers. We've had some conversation about purpose recently, and I'm not sure quite when Marianne's gonna push this out and air this, but we'll tip our cap to the notion of something that we're gonna intentionally talk a little bit about throughout this year with all of our staff in regard to purpose. So I guess just simply a couple thoughts on what gives you purpose in your work. Jason, why don't you lead us off?
Yeah, I mean, mine's pretty simple. My idea of purpose and what gives me purpose is really just helping people grow in the things that they're passionate about. Helping people find their passions, helping people work to constantly get better, and not always what maybe I think they need to get better at, but what is it that they care about, and how can I help support them through that process?
Great.
So.
Charlene?
Much the same. I actually wrote down here the answer is simple: people.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about people. And for our age group, the youngest learners, I think it's about families, the family unit as a whole, really at that age, and helping those families accomplish what they need to for their youngest learners. So,
Yeah.
people.
Yes. It's so interesting. I'm thinking, especially this time of year, about each of your unique places, kind of in this notion of sometimes we overlook transition in a child's schooling tenure. So I think about bringing in that 3-year-old, you know what I'm saying, or even younger, and building the comfort level in a in a preschool program, and then we shift them to kindergarten. And some of the most nervous human beings in the world are first-time kindergarten parents.
Yep.
You know, and then they get really comfortable, and as fifth graders, in the case of our district, they're the biggest fish in the pond,
Yeah.
and they can do no wrong. And then we shift them to the middle school, and how many nervous, 11 or 12-year-olds are, it's mounting over the next 2 weeks.
And their families.
Yeah, and the only people that are more anxious are mom and dad. So, purpose. What's your thoughts, Amy?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think when I think of my purpose, I think twofold. One is something that's very important to me is public education. Education is a right that cannot be taken away from anybody. So that's why I serve in the public sector of education. I think that's very important. That's my purpose, is to bring that to everybody and be a champion behind all of my students and my parents and my staff. Everybody needs somebody in their corner, and hopefully that's always going to be me.
Great. So family and fun are important here in Romeo. We certainly value the work we have to do, and we take it seriously. But along the way, I always tell people school can be fun, even for the adults. So family and fun are important here. Share a little bit about your family, maybe, and something you enjoy to do away from work. Amy, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, anytime I get an opportunity to publicly thank my husband, I have to, because talking about champions, he is my champion. He is my backbone. So my husband is just, I mean, now that we're new to Michigan again, it's really fun to be new to the state that I grew up in. Whenever we've visited just before moving here officially, it's always a little town. Let's go spend some time in Charlevoix. Let's go spend some time in Petoskey. Let's go up north, Houghton Lake. So we're just trying to explore and just relearn, and for him actually learn, Michigan and see its beauty, and just spending time as a family. I'm very much a family person. Get to spend time with my mom and dad.
Yeah.
My brother, my sister-in-law, my whole family. It's really great to just be here, be with family after being away for so long.
Great. Charlene?
Yeah, my husband is my biggest cheerleader. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary this year, so he's been around for a while,
Yeah.
He's my ride or die.
Yeah.
We have 2 daughters. They're in college, working, doing great. And our family, we're travelers. We love to travel. That's our fun. We've been to the Middle East. My girls did a trip to Vietnam for a mission trip this year. We encourage them to go see the world and explore the world, and we love to do it with them. So
cool.
Yeah.
Jason?
Yeah. I have to thank my wife. She's been such a support to me, just supporting my crazy ideas all the time and crazy pursuits. And so we just celebrated our 14th anniversary. Do the math on that. Just kidding. I have a son who's 12, plays football and wrestles, very STEM minded, and has been 3D printing the universe this summer. My daughter is 10. She rides horses, and she's absolutely horse obsessed right now. In fact, she's been at horse camp all week.
Yeah.
So we, again, like to travel. We haven't been to as extravagant of places, but we do love to get away and just unwind and relax and just be free.
Yeah, cool. So I'll ask you to finish start this answer with answering the question. You've been on the job for X number of weeks, maybe X number of days in some case. So you've been on the job for X long. How about a couple highlights or things that have stood out for you in that time? So Charlene, I'm going to let you lead off because of the summer program. You've actually had a little bit more taste of, what the full deal is than maybe Jason and Amy have. So
Yes.
lead us off here.
I've been on the job for over 5 weeks already, so I'm starting to really dig in and
Yeah.
get into it. Highlight has been summer camp.
Yeah.
So I've got to see some of your kids, Amy, that you haven't seen
Yay.
yet. And I have got to spend a lot of time with the littles as well. And just getting to know families has been a lot of fun this summer. And I've got to go on field trips.
Yeah.
It's been great. I love it.
Get firsthand our construction.
Yes.
The
Yes.
never-ending construction
never-ending
project at
construction.
Croswell,
Yes,
but we're
yes.
close.
And I've lived through that.
Yes.
Lake Orion built a
Yeah,
early
that's
childhood
right.
building, so I'm not afraid of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Jason?
So it's been 4 days. It's been pretty eventful 4 days. By now, I've already presented at a board workshop.
That's true.
I think that was day 3. I got to do that.
Yeah.
Got to sit, on my first day here, I actually got to sit on some of the academy work, some of the building of a middle school. Forget the name exactly. We're calling it the profile of a middle school scholar, I believe.
Yeah.
So that was right into it, just seeing the things that we're doing here, things we're trying to figure out in the middle school level. That one, again, just trial by fire, just throw me right in the mix. So those have been 2 really great ways just to get to know the job and the people, and
Yeah.
feels like I've been here for 10 years already.
All right.
And you keep coming back.
Yeah.
How about you, Amy?
I mean, I would say officially, my first start date was August 8th, but, I feel like Charlene and I kind of started at that same time. I jumped right in, with meetings. And for me, the highlight, I've been going on coffee dates and lunch dates with my staff. And that's been really great just to have, 2 hours of uninterrupted time. That's never going to happen again, once the school year starts. And just sitting down and talking about our families and our journeys and really helping each other know each other as human beings outside of the school building. That's been really invaluable for me.
Yeah. It's interesting. A few of the folks you've met with, over the course of the last month, have sent me, simple emails, I guess I would say in most cases. So I think we got this right.
Aw,
She's going to be great. So
I appreciate
there's some
that.
affirmation
Thank you.
for you that not in every case, but definitely some folks have reached out and maybe some folks that really they were really wanted to be involved in the hiring process and were invested in who the next leader of Amanda Moore was going to be. So perhaps maybe the most important question for some, why Romeo? Charlene, lead us off.
Sure. You having me lead off again.
Yeah.
All right. Well, when I applied for the position, I really was not totally familiar with Romeo in the community. And being an educator, I started to educate myself. I would listen to these podcasts. I researched the leadership of Romeo schools. Actually drove around the community just to see what it was like and get a feel for it. And I kind of fell in love with Romeo in a short amount of time and pretty quickly felt like this was right where I needed to be and where I was supposed to be. And 5 weeks in, I still feel that way. So
Awesome. Amy?
I think very similar. I think we could just keep stealing each other's answers. But yeah, when I was applying for jobs out here in Michigan, I wasn't sure, what would stick. I'm like, okay, I'm coming from out of state, I was just not sure where I would end up landing, who would take me, who would want to interview me, and I when I saw a position open up at Romeo, my husband and I, whenever we would visit Michigan, we'd drive through little towns to say, oh, when we move back to Michigan, here's where we're going to live. And we drove through Romeo one time, and I just saw that it's this cute little community, and you can go into the coffee shop and the people working at the coffee shop know your name, and they're going to ask about your husband, they're going to ask about your kids. And being in a suburb of Phoenix for so long, where I had new neighbors across the street that I didn't even know their name, that's important to me, to have that community feel. And ultimately I made this move to be closer to family, and just sitting down with you and talking about our family, when you and I were able to sit down during the interview process, that really spoke to my heart. Just that, you're a superintendent of a school district and you wanted to sit down over coffee and talk about our families together. Like, that's huge. That said a lot to me. So just the family values in Romeo and the community feels just exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Great. Jason?
Yeah, so, kind of started, in the process of just knowing, learning about Romeo, actually through Rita. Known Rita for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's at Hampar.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly all the buildings yet, but so she spoke really highly of the community, and just how well everybody supports everybody, and in doing the research too, just of trying to understand your strategic plan here, and just seeing the investment that the community is making in education here, just was outstanding. So I got real excited about the opportunity. And the funny thing is, after every one of the interviews, I went home and talked with my wife, and I told her, hey, they asked this question, why Romeo? Well, turns out you were going to ask it every time. So I kind of just talked to her. I said, yeah, I talked about the community, and she kind of mentioned, obviously I'm from Oxford. I was varsity football coach for at least the last 5 years. So obviously everybody knows what happened during that time. But, as I'm talking about community, she asks me, do you remember what Romeo did when we came back after our tragedy, our football team specifically? And what Romeo did, our first game back, was at Barnabo. And I know you were heavily involved in that process. And honestly, my answer to her was, I don't quite remember. And I actually had to go back, and I found a Macomb Daily article, and they had a picture of us standing at the 50-yard line praying together, Oxford and Romeo, before the game. And, it kind of just put me back in that moment of just, again, that season was a blur completely, but just to know that there's a community out there, any community who would do that before a varsity football game in two, pretty large football towns.
Yes.
Anybody who's willing to kind of just pause for the moment to just wrap their arms around us. That showed me a lot about your community, the people here, the ways that you support one another, and the ways that you'll support a neighbor. And obviously I've had a few times to rehearse this now. So, but I guess that just always rang to me the question of, well, why not Romeo? Why wouldn't I want to be a part of that community? Mm-hmm. And again, thank you for everything that you guys have done for us.
Yeah. So I guess as we're wrapping up, I think there's a couple things that I want, our community, our listeners to take away from this. And it doesn't really matter as much to me whether it's some of our employees, some of our parents, maybe even some of our secondary level students who might listen into some of these, because we've had some of their classmates do some of these, so people are leaning in, but also just the larger community and families and residents that aren't maybe necessarily directly connected, that we take searching for educators, whether it's our teachers or our leaders in that. We're very intent upon that, and there's always like a unique, maybe a unique need with what we're looking for to fit the team, whether that's specifically to the building or maybe in the larger, and I want our listeners to know that with each of your hires, like, it was a little bit about experience, maybe a lot of bit about experience, but just personality and connection are really important, because we have to bring the right people in to continue to foster and grow that community feel. And I want our listeners to know that each of you, like, overwhelmingly, through the process have fit that. And so kudos to you. And then, so we take it seriously, we're thorough about it, but, I also want them to know you as people. And, I always tell, sometimes in difficult conversations, like, we're human, You know what I'm saying? And one of the things that I think I value and overwhelming majority of our staff is we make mistakes, we own them, and when we make things right. And I think people appreciate that for us. So our new leaders, get some rest, make sure you keep that balance in your life. And I'm super excited to see the work that you're going to do, and grateful that you're here in our family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Robinson, for hosting today's podcast, and a special thank you to Amy, Charlene, and Jason for giving our listeners some insights into why they made the decision to join us here at Romeo Community Schools. Thank you for joining us, and tune in next week to keep up with Romeo Community Schools. This podcast is powered by the MIT TV of Romeo, Michigan. If you're looking to start a podcast for your business or personal use, look no further than MIT TV. Their in-studio podcast experience allows you to record perfect audio and capture amazing video. That's all right here at the MIT TV of Romeo, Michigan. Contact them now via email for a free consultation and schedule a visit at mit.tvpodcast@gmail.com. That's mitt.tvpodcast@gmail.com.